Hi guys, I've been reviewing a lot of recently released games on this channel nowadays. And while I still love to update my wishlist as much as I can and share my thoughts on all of these recently released games, my original goal of this channel was to review underrated or overlooked games. And I feel like I've been slacking off in this aspect for quite some time now. That's why I decided to make this video. I hope these small reviews will do all these games still some justice, and hopefully you will enjoy this format as well, because I'm probably going to make more videos like this in the future. There are still a bunch of these games in my library or on my wishlist, so get excited for more to come. Alright, let's begin with my personal favorite of all these underrated games, and that is Vision Soft Reset. It's from the same studio that created Moonlight Pulse, a very charming team-based Metroidvania that came out this year and really impressed me, so I knew I was going to enjoy this game as well. This little Metroidvania game is probably one of the most creative Metroidvania games I have ever played. It doesn't have the biggest map, but you are going to revisit so many areas because this game has all to do with timelines and time manipulation, so I didn't mind the small map size at all. You discover that the planet you are on is going to explode in 20 minutes if you can't save it in time. With the aid of your time reversing powers and other upgrades you will find along the way, you will have to open the entrance to the peak of the mountain with these 4 giant orbs that are scattered all over the world. But just like with all time loop games, you will have to find all 4 orbs in one playthrough, because when you reset your timeline or you start a new one, it will delete all your progress, except for the abilities you will find during your adventure. What I really loved about this game was the time loop mechanic and how it was implemented. This time tree shows you all your different timelines and at what time in which location you have saved. I think at the end of the game I had like 14 different timelines in my time tree, but I just really enjoyed how simple but effective it was. At one point you also start a generator, and this will activate certain machines and obstacles all over the map. So certain areas that were accessible at first aren't anymore, but also the other way around. The time tree also lets you know in which timeline you have activated this generator and in which you didn't. I love this feature. It's very creative and innovative. The core gameplay is also really enjoyable. You can see in the future, so this means you are able to see the attacks of an enemy in advance indicated with these grey silhouettes. And this gimmick makes for some interesting and really creative boss fights as well. It's all about time manipulation and making sure you dodge at the right time, because you don't have that much health and you only have a limited amount of do-overs. So quick reflexes and well-timed attacks are needed to survive all these fun encounters. I also enjoyed the new abilities you will get along the way. A few of them give you some incredible mobility upgrades, and they are all super enjoyable and make you very versatile. There are just so many other small features I like about this game. I'm not going to spoil too much, but so many areas require a bit of puzzle solving, and once you manage to solve it once, you can basically skip the whole area in a different timeline. Thankfully, solving these puzzles can be time consuming, but fun at the same time, and it can give you such a satisfying feeling when you finally are able to progress. Some obstacles are even time-based, so they can only be destroyed in a certain amount of time. Getting around the map will become a breeze after a while though. So many hidden shortcuts are available or will open up for you when you have the right ability. So getting somewhere early enough shouldn't be that difficult eventually. I also really appreciate that many conversations are optional. You can find them back in your talk menu, and they can be pretty useful to listen to. But I think this is the perfect way to make sure certain plot elements will not interrupt the gameplay too often. I would love it if more games would implement this feature. Yeah, I don't know what more I could say about this game. It's definitely an underrated gem that managed to impress me on so many levels. If you love Metroidvanias and you would like to experience a bit of a twist on this genre, you should definitely give this game a try. Hopefully it will get more attention as time goes on, because it's honestly one of the most underrated games I have ever played. MARSUPILAMI HOOBADVENTURE is an action platformer reminiscent of the Donkey Kong Country games with colorful visuals, a very charming presentation and a lot to collect. The game is divided into 3 separate worlds, each with their own setting, and there is a bonus world that is added as DLC. It's a bit on the easy side, but the last world and the DLC world have some nice challenges up their sleeve. I was never in danger of losing all my lives, but I appreciated the developers weren't afraid to ramp up the difficulty during some sequences. I still think it's targeted towards a more younger audience, but I thought it was quite enjoyable and a really solid experience from start to finish. There are a bunch of extra challenges like entering a hidden portal to a bonus room, where you can achieve a ticket to open up a bonus level where you can farm extra lives, or you can just collect default collectibles in the form of feathers that are scattered all over a level, and they will let you open up pathways to even more bonus levels if you collected a bunch of them. There are also optional time trials, and the DLC world called the Hidden World has this Cataclysm mode that makes all the levels of this world a lot more challenging. But you will only unlock this mode after finishing the world itself first. It's just a really solid and wholesome game. You can even choose out of 3 different MARSUPILAMIs. They are basically just reskins of each other, but I appreciate the gesture. The controls work great, and collecting everything is kinda enjoyable as well, but I would have loved a bit more challenging gameplay if I'm honest. Other than that, it's a really beautiful action platformer that, despite its rather easy difficulty, deserves a lot more attention. The level design is completely fine and sometimes even great, and the visuals are just a feast for your eyes, so there should be no reason to skip this underrated gem. I think there's something for everyone in this game. If you are a casual player with not much experience in platform games, definitely give it a try. And if you are a veteran player, wait till the more later stages, and you will have a great time as well. I'm sure of it. It took me a bit more than 4 hours to finish this game with all bonus levels unlocked, and with some levels completed in time trial or cataclysm mode. But I'm pretty certain 100% completing this game will at least double the playtime, so check it out if it looks interesting to you. Castaway is a charming old-school action-adventure game that is divided into 2 different modes. The first one is the island mode, which basically functions as a long tutorial, and the other mode is called the tower, which is a roguelike mode where you have to survive 50 floors and get stronger along the way by random generated upgrades if you keep collecting these coins. Let me first start with the island mode. It's really reminiscent of some Zelda games, and it's full of charm and nostalgia. After you are stranded on an island, all your items and even your dog get stolen, and you can get them back by discovering the whole island and conquering its 3 dungeons. It's a pretty straightforward adventure, and I wish there was a bit more enemy variety. But I was incredibly charmed by the overall presentation, and I think it's a great way to get introduced to all your abilities and skills before you enter the real challenge, which is the tower. The island mode took me like 45 minutes to beat, and I really enjoyed every minute of it. The boss fights and the dungeons are a bit on the easy side, but that's totally fine. Like I said, it functions more as a tutorial than the actual game, so it's supposed to be on the easy side. The tower is not on the easy side though. When you die, you lose everything you have gained along the way and you have to start from the beginning again. The layout of the tower remains the same, so each floor has always the same enemies and the same traps, but the upgrades are random. When you defeat an enemy, it will leave coins behind, and collecting these coins is mandatory to become stronger, but they will disappear if you aren't quick enough to grab them, so this adds a bit more strategy to this mode. For example, are you going for the long distance kill, like reflecting projectiles with your sword so you have an easier time defeating an enemy which is closer to you, but you won't be in time to collect the coins that are left behind? Or do you dodge the projectiles and leave that one specific enemy for last, so you can grab the coins it will leave behind? I think it's a really clever way of putting some pressure on the player and forcing them to make some risky plays. You can go for a safer approach, but this will make the boss fight at the top of the tower a really hard challenge, because you don't have a lot of upgrades, but it's doable, I guess. Anyways, I also really enjoyed this mode. It's a lot more challenging and more my cup of tea. It's also really addicting, because every playthrough is different despite the same layout of the tower, and it's 50 floors. I think this mode will keep you engaged for at least a few hours, if you don't mind the permadeath mechanic, of course. So generally speaking, I really enjoyed Castaway. I liked the tower a lot more because I appreciated the challenge and the quick decision making. But I also really enjoyed the island mode. I thought it was a really charming introduction to this game's core mechanics. It took me a few tries to complete the tower and beat the final boss, so my total playtime was like 3 to 4 hours. The island mode doesn't have a lot of replay value, but the tower certainly has. So if you are looking for a pretty short but charming adventure that is very underrated and also really accessible to all kinds of players, you should definitely check it out. Rise and Shine is a twin-stick shooter puzzle hybrid made by the same developer that created The Night Witch, a very creative bullet hell-like Metroidvania with some deck building elements that came out a few years ago, and I loved it. This game is pretty short and linear, but there is some replay value if you would like to collect all the secrets and conquer all the challenges. It has a lot of cartoony gore, but the humor is very meta and the world is full of fun references to classic games, so what is there not to like? It's not an easy game though. Many challenges, boss fights and even some puzzles are a lot of trial and error, and sometimes there isn't really a clear explanation. But you will come across so many crazy scenarios, like surviving a tunnel full of zombies or recharging the heart of a colossus, that you don't mind the many do-overs and sometimes fake solutions. Aiming with your gun works great, but there are many situations where you have to switch a lot between your ammo and functions of your gun. It's a bit stressful when you have to dodge all these bullets and missiles at the same time, but most projectiles can be destroyed with your default ammo, and your health slowly regens if you don't take damage for a while. I still messed up the button prompts a lot, but that was just me not remembering which button I had to press to switch to certain ammo. I also had a lot of trouble hitting some of my shots after a radio-controlled bullet section, for example. But eventually I got the hang of it. There's just a lot to love about this game. The overall presentation is amazing, and I really enjoyed the comic book cutscenes and all the fun references to other classic games. For a game that took me like 3 hours to beat, it's full of crazy scenarios that change up the gameplay nicely. I was always excited to see what was coming up next, and I never got bored by the challenge after challenge like gameplay. I also enjoyed the many puzzles and short minigames that you have to overcome here and there. In my opinion, Rise and Shine is a game that has the perfect blend of charming visuals, despite the gore, challenging but engaging gameplay, and a witty story. If you don't mind some trial and error like gameplay, you should definitely check it out. System Purge is a horror-themed precision platformer where you have to rescue your lover from a dark facility full of dangerous traps, very dark rooms and almost zombie-like enemies. What I really liked about this game is the overall atmosphere and presentation. While the gameplay is also pretty decent, the visuals and world building totally elevate the whole experience without a doubt. There were so many moments that I almost jumped out of my seat, and sometimes it was because of a small jump scare, but most of the time it was because the unnerving atmosphere got me a bit anxious. I wouldn't call it a scary game, but it has for sure some dark vibes. It's a pretty short game though. There are 7 different sectors you have to travel through, and each one of them introduces you to some new environments and deadly obstacles. But most of them can be finished in 10 minutes or so. There's also barely any side content. Once per sector you have a chance to take a path to the left, and when you reach the end you will get a bit more backstory about the existence of the facility. But there are no collectibles or other hidden secrets. I didn't really mind it though. It's a short but very solid game that knows how to keep you engaged the whole way through. There are a lot of different traps and obstacles, and even though you die in one hit, I got never too frustrated or felt a sequence was impossible to overcome. It's not a groundbreaking platformer, like it plays it pretty safe, but it's really good at what it does, and especially the overall presentation and sound design deserve some more recognition. I also played the demo of the sequel called System Purge Hollow Point during the most recent Steam Next Fest, and it was just as solid if not even better than the original game. The great atmosphere is still there and many traps make a return. But there are also so many new challenges and scary but epic encounters added to this sequel. I'm fully convinced that the sequel will do the original game justice, and hopefully it will get more attention. Because this franchise, I guess I can call it a franchise now, deserves a lot more praise than it's getting right now. The Wizard and The Slug is a very narrative-driven, comedic action platformer that reminded me a bit of the charm of Undertale. Behind the randomness and goofiness hides a very heartfelt story, and the gameplay looks pretty straightforward, but it has some interesting mechanics that makes it a unique experience. This game consists out of 3 acts and a few different endings. Each act tells you some lore and a bit of backstory, and at the same time you will come across all these comedic and sometimes even emotional scenarios. This game made me laugh or chuckle a few times. There are a lot of funny interactions or just ridiculous scenarios and cutscenes. Like an ongoing rivalry between a banana and an orange, for example. You are going to meet all kinds of charming and sometimes insane but endearing characters, and some of them will even accompany you for a short while if you are nice to them. The game is pretty linear and it doesn't have a lot of replay value despite its multiple endings, but the gameplay is still interesting enough to not make you lose interest. This game also has a pretty unique health system. You will only receive damage when you are in your smallest form if you jump multiple times, and die when you get hit twice in this form. Or if you jump in a death pit, of course. But attacking makes you smaller as well, so a small strategy is sometimes required to overcome an obstacle. I really enjoyed this mechanic, and it added for sure some extra challenge to the overall gameplay. It's not a difficult game, but some action or platform sequences can be a small difficulty spike. Especially when you have to platform over all these instant death spikes, for example. The game is really generous with its checkpoints though, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. I highly recommend to give this underrated gem a try. The story can interrupt the gameplay a lot and also at random times, and sometimes the jokes fall a bit flat, but overall it's a very solid action platformer with a well written and heartfelt story that managed to make me a bit emotional sometimes. If you are looking for a high octane action platformer, this is not the game for you. But if you don't mind a very linear adventure full of charm, humor and memorable characters, you should definitely check it out. You will never know what to expect next, and sometimes it's even more ridiculous than the last event. Like a totally optional trading minigame that kept me busy for almost 30 minutes, just to get some achievements. And that's why The Wizard and the Slug is awesome. Goo Keeper is a 2D hand-drawn Metroidvania that doesn't have the most polished visuals or gameplay, but it does have some fun abilities, and it's really satisfying how strong you can become after equipping and combining some specific upgrades. At the end of the game, I was just an unstoppable beast, and most bosses were destroyed in seconds, even the final boss. Taking your time to explore this world feels very rewarding, because you will come across some secret abilities if you explore every nook and cranny. But is it also fun to explore this world? Well, I like the fact that there isn't really a specific order in how you are going to explore this world. Eventually you will probably get to a dead end, but the world itself is really interconnected with a lot of different paths for you to take. But the overall level design is a bit mediocre though, and sometimes even frustrating, because you have many spiked obstacles that will reset your position if you touch them. The same goes for the boss fights. Most of them are pretty basic and they have very telegraphed and easy to dodge attacks, or they are way too challenging, and to beat them you will have to find a cheap spot or a cheap strategy, like going back and forth and spamming your projectiles even when the boss is off screen. This isn't how boss fights should be. They should be challenging in the right way and not feel like an impossible task. I also disliked a few songs of this game's soundtrack. Some songs just consisted out of random notes, and it felt like a person without any musical experience just improvised something. I know it sounds like I'm really negative about this game, but it does have some redeeming qualities, and that's why I still decided to include it in this video. I really enjoyed the power roll ability, for example. I also liked all the different upgrades and how combining some of them unlocked even more powerful versions of your attacks or abilities. And it was really interesting to see how non-linear this world was and how rewarding it was to carefully explore it. But it's for sure unbalanced and a bit messy in some places, and this could cause frustration and ruin your overall experience. I still feel like the positive outweigh the negatives in this case, but some patches are highly needed to make it a more polished and enjoyable experience. Give this one a try if you like Metroidvanias and non-linear exploration, but don't expect innovative level design or mind-blowing boss fights, because then you will be a bit disappointed, I'm afraid. Catmaze is a charming Metroidvania filled to the brim with Slavic mythology and characters all made by one solo developer. The same developer that made Pheromonium, which is another pretty underrated Metroidvania if you ask me. While Catmaze certainly lacks some polishing here and there, like there are a lot of missing or overlooping sound effects, most boss fights are rather dull and they are a bit time consuming, and controlling this wolf doesn't feel great either. It still has an intriguing story and some captivating gameplay that introduces you to some interesting mechanics and combat styles. You use all these different familiars as your weapons, some for ranged attacks and others for close ranged attacks. Unlocking all these familiars and switching between them was a fun way of keeping the combat fresh and exciting. There's also another interesting mechanic that makes you lose attack damage if you get hit too often, and you can only regain your strength by collecting all these small white orbs. Brute forcing your way through everything gets punished by this mechanic, and I thought it was a clever way of forcing the player to be a bit more cautious. Exploring this world and finding every secret or hidden collectible is also very enjoyable. The fast travel system works great and the exploration feels very rewarding. There were also a decent amount of side quests for you to complete, and completing all of them will unlock a different ending. So I definitely recommend to fully explore this game's world. It took me 6 to 7 hours to fully complete this game, and while I certainly have some gripes with it, especially the lackluster boss fights, I still enjoyed most of my playthrough, and I'm very impressed it's all made by one person. The overall presentation, like the visuals, the world building and even the music is really well done, and while I would have loved a bit more creative level design, I wasn't put off by its absence. It already gained a bit more attention the last few weeks, but in my opinion it deserves a lot more positive buzz. I wouldn't consider it as one of the best Metroidvanias I have ever played, but after playing Pheromonium a few years ago and this game more recently, there's no doubt in my mind Slava Gris or Red Black Spade is a developer you shouldn't underestimate. Thanks for watching.